The homeless woman asked for 10 days of food in exchange for a miracle. The Duke's physician laughed first. The servants followed, and soon the entire marble entrance hall rang with amusement. Ruth Alder stood in the middle of it all, with rain dripping from her torn cloak and mud drying white upon her boots. She looked at the motionless legs of Nathaniel Harcourt, Duke of Greyhaven, and repeated the promise no sensible woman would have dared to make. "Feed me for 10 days, Your Grace, and I will help you walk again." This is a story of a woman whom hunger could bend but never break, and a proud man who had to lose command of his own body before he learned whom he could trust. The November rain had followed Ruth for 6 miles. It had slipped through the seam at her shoulder, soaked the wool beneath, and turned every breath into a shiver by the time she reached Greyhaven Hall. The great house rose beyond iron gates and bare elms, its pale stone darkened by the weather. Warm light burned in 40 windows. From the kitchen chimneys came the smell of roasting meat, onions, and bread. Ruth had eaten nothing since the previous morning. She had not come to beg from the Duke. She had come because the parish beadle had ordered her out of the abandoned toll house where she had slept for 3 nights. A maid at the village pump had said Greyhaven distributed broken loaves at the servants' door every Thursday. Ruth needed 1 corner of shelter, 1 meal, and enough strength to continue north. Instead, she found the servants' courtyard in confusion. A black carriage stood crooked beneath the porte-cochere. 2 footmen strained to lift a bath chair down from its rear platform, while a groom fought to quiet the sweating horses. The chair had a high leather hood, 3 wheels, and a steering bar of polished walnut. Its occupant sat rigid beneath a fur-lined coat. Nathaniel Harcourt was 34 years old and had been unable to walk for 18 months. The fall from his carriage had broken 2 ribs and injured his back. Though no bone had pierced the skin, his London physician had predicted recovery. Then 1 month had become 3, and 3 had become 12. By the second winter, the Duke had dismissed hope as an impertinent visitor who had overstayed his welcome. He was a striking man even in illness. His face was lean, his black hair brushed away from a broad brow, and his eyes held the cold gray of the sea beyond the eastern cliffs. Yet pain had hollowed the skin beneath those eyes. His gloved hands gripped the chair arms as the footman lowered him. "Keep it level," snapped Dr. Horace Fell, a thick-waisted gentleman in a beaver hat. "His Grace is not a sack of turnips." 1 wheel struck the stone. The Duke's left foot jerked. It was a small movement, almost hidden by the carriage rug. Ruth saw the boot turn inward and the leather above his knee tighten. She stopped beneath the archway. Dr. Fell saw her a moment later. "You there, away from the house." Ruth's gaze remained on the Duke's boots. "Did you feel that, Your Grace?" Every servant in the courtyard went still. Nathaniel lifted his head. "Feel what?" The wheel struck stone. "Your left leg," answered. Dr. Fell stepped between them. The rain jeweled the shoulders of his black coat. "His Grace's condition is not an entertainment for vagrants." "I did not say it was." "Then go." The Duke looked beyond the physician. Perhaps it was her lack of deference. Perhaps it was only boredom. "What did you see?" Ruth approached by 1 pace, no more, a contraction above the knee. Not the loose movement of a boot being shaken. The muscle pulled. Nathaniel's expression sharpened. "And what great college granted you this wisdom?" "None that would admit a woman." A groom smothered a laugh. Dr. Fell did not. "She wants money. I want bread," Ruth replied. "There is a difference." The Duke studied her torn hem, the blue cast of her fingers, and the hollow line beneath her cheekbone. Shame should have made her lower her eyes. Hunger should have softened her voice. Neither happened. "Bring her inside," Nathaniel said. Dr. Fell turned. "Your Grace, if I am to be examined by every roadside prophet in England, I would prefer to be dry." That was how Ruth entered Greyhaven Hall, not as a guest, nor servant, nor patient, but as the evening's diversion. The entrance hall smelled of beeswax, wet wool, and the cedar logs burning in a fireplace large enough to stand within. Portraits of dead Harcourts watched from the walls. Beneath them gathered the living household, footmen, maids, the housekeeper, the butler, and 3 dinner guests drawn from the salon by the promise of something ridiculous. Lord Sebastian Ray came last. He was the Duke's cousin and heir presumptive, a handsome man of 30 with pale lashes and a smile that never warmed his eyes. Since Nathaniel's accident, Sebastian had taken increasing charge of estate business. He moved now to the back of the Duke's chair and rested one hand upon it as though the carved wood already belonged to him. "Who is our visitor?" "A physician from the University of the Road," Nathaniel said. The laughter began there. Ruth waited for it to finish. She had endured harsher sounds, a landlord's fist upon a locked door, a shovel striking frozen earth over her father's grave, the crackle of fire consuming the apothecary shop that had been both home and livelihood. Laughter could not bruise what those things had left. "Take off the rug," she said. Dr. Fell's mouth opened. "You will not give orders here. Then His Grace may keep his miracle." The bluntness stopped the room cold. Nathaniel looked at his butler. "Mr. Bell, remove it." The rug came away. Beneath it, the Duke's legs were enclosed in black leather braces from thigh to ankle. The straps had been pulled so tightly that the edges bit through his breeches. Ruth crouched. She did not touch him. "How many hours each day do you wear these?" "From waking until bed," Nathaniel answered. "Who moves your legs?" "The valet changes my clothes." "That was not my question." Dr. Fell gave a short, incredulous breath. "Movement inflames the damaged nerves. Rest is essential." Ruth pointed to a purple ridge above the Duke's right boot. "And does rest usually leave a living man's foot the color of a plum?" Sebastian's fingers tightened upon the chair, Nathaniel noticed. So did Ruth. She asked permission before laying 2 fingertips at the Duke's ankle. His skin was cold. She moved upward, testing warmth and pulse through the stocking. Then she pressed the blunt end of her only hairpin against the sole of his left boot. His toes curled. No one laughed. Dr. Fell recovered first. "A reflex proves nothing. A frog's leg may twitch after it has been cut from the body. His leg is attached," Ruth said. "That may assist us." One of the maids made a choking sound behind her hand. Nathaniel's mouth almost moved into a smile. "Almost. What is your name?" "Ruth Alder." "And what do you propose, Miss Alder?" She rose. Water had gathered in a small dark pool around her boots. 10 days. Warm food, a dry bed, clean cloths, and leave to work without being hindered by anyone who profits from your grace remaining in that chair. Silence spread outward from the last words. Lord Sebastian's smile thinned. A grave accusation from a woman who entered by the charity door. "I name no one. You did not need to." The Duke's eyes stayed upon Ruth. "If you fail, I leave with nothing. You arrived with nothing. Then you risk very little." That made them laugh again. Guests, footmen, even the butler looking hurriedly at the floor. The sound climbed toward the painted ceiling. Nathaniel did not join them. His gaze had settled on the worn leather case strapped beneath Ruth's cloak. It was long and narrow, polished by years of handling. "What is in the case?" "My father's instruments." Dr. Fell looked at it more carefully. "Your father was a surgeon?" "An army surgeon." "Where?" "Portugal, Spain, and Belgium." The physician's face changed so briefly that only Ruth saw it. Lord Sebastian bent nearer the Duke. "Nathaniel, this has gone far enough." "On the contrary." Nathaniel's voice quieted, which made every person lean closer. "For 18 months, learned men have charged me guineas to explain why nothing can be done. Miss Alder asks only to be fed while attempting something. I find the difference refreshing." He turned the steering bar and faced Ruth fully. "You have your 10 days." Dr. Fell protested. Sebastian called it dangerous. The dinner guests murmured that the Duke's pain had disturbed his judgment. Nathaniel silenced them with one raised hand. Mrs. Pike will give Miss Alder a room in the West Servants' Wing. She will eat at the household table. Mr. Bell will provide whatever ordinary supplies she requests. Dr. Fell may observe, but he will not interfere unless I command it." Ruth's breath caught at the words household table. She pressed her lips together before gratitude could weaken the bargain. "One more condition," Nathaniel said. "If this proves a confidence trick, I shall have you taken before the magistrate. If it proves a confidence trick, Your Grace, I shall walk there myself." His eyes dropped to his own feet. The cruelty of the answer reached Ruth a moment too late. Sebastian smiled as if he had finally found the blood beneath her skin. Dr. Fell looked satisfied. The servants' faces closed. Ruth could have apologized. Instead, she crouched again and loosened the first leather strap by half an inch. Nathaniel inhaled sharply. "Pain?" she asked. "Pins, hundreds of them. Good." His head snapped toward her. "You have a peculiar understanding of that word. Pain means the road between your legs and your mind is not entirely closed." She loosened the second strap. Color began, slowly, to return above the boot. "Tomorrow morning," she said, "we discover how much of the road remains." But before the household retired that night, Dr. Fell carried a locked medicine chest into Lord Sebastian's room. And behind the bolted door, the Duke's cousin asked the question that turned a 10-day wager into something far more dangerous. How did she know? Ruth's room contained a narrow bed, a washstand, and a grate in which someone had lit a small coal fire. To her it was nearly a palace. She sat upon the mattress without removing her cloak and stared at the bowl Mrs. Pike had placed on the table, beef broth, a heel of bread. Half an apple, her hand shook when she lifted the spoon. She forced herself to take the first mouthful slowly. Her father had taught her that starving men sometimes died when abundance returned too quickly. Broth first. Bread softened within it. No greed, however loudly the body begged. The door opened without a knock. Lord Sebastian entered and closed it behind him. Ruth set down the spoon. A gentleman usually waits to be invited into a woman's bedchamber, a lady's bedchamber. His gaze traveled over the damp cloak and cracked boots. "You are neither." He placed 2 gold sovereigns on the table. Their edges caught the firelight. "Take these and leave before dawn." 2 sovereigns could have bought lodging for months. They could have replaced her boots, filled her stomach, and carried her to Edinburgh, where her father had once known men who might remember his name kindly. Ruth pushed the coins back. 3, Sebastian said. "You are bidding against your own fear, my lord. I advise you to stop before it becomes expensive." His smile vanished. "My cousin cannot walk. Then I shall fail, and you will have saved your money." "You misunderstand this household. Nathaniel's disappointment does not pass quietly. When hope turns against him, he destroys the person who brought it." "Is that what happened to the last physician?" The question struck something hidden. Sebastian's right thumb rubbed the pale mark where a signet ring had once sat. "Be gone by dawn," he said, "or you will learn why every door in this county has closed against an Alder." He left the sovereigns on the table. Ruth did not touch them. At 7 the following morning, a footman conducted her to the Duke's private library. Nathaniel sat near the fire in a plain wheeled chair used indoors. His leather braces had already been fastened. A silver tray beside him held coffee, toast, and a small brown bottle. Dr. Fell measured dark drops into a glass. "What is that?" Ruth asked. "Medicine," he replied. "I can see the bottle." Nathaniel lifted the glass. "Laudanum. 20 drops in the morning, 20 at noon, 30 before sleep." Ruth went still. Such doses were not unheard of. Laudanum was sold by apothecaries and kept in respectable medicine cupboards across England. It eased coughs, quieted pain, and carried suffering into a warm distance. It also clouded thought, slowed the bowels, stole appetite, and demanded more of itself with each passing week. "How long?" she asked. "Since the accident. The dose increased 6 months ago," Dr. Fell said. His Grace's spasms became severe. Were the spasms worse before or after the increase? Fell's cheeks colored. "You exceed your place." Ruth took the glass from Nathaniel's hand and held it to the light. A bitter medicinal scent rose from the amber liquid. "You will not stop it at once," she said. "That would be cruel and dangerous. But if you wish to feel what your legs are saying, this must be reduced." Nathaniel glanced at Fell. "By how much?" "2 drops less this morning, 2 less at noon. We watch your pulse, your stomach, your sleep, and the pain. If your body objects, we slow." "You presume to prescribe opium now?" Fell demanded. "No, I presume to count." Nathaniel held out his hand. "Prepare another glass." Dr. Fell obeyed, but each drop struck the crystal like a tiny hammer. Ruth began with the braces. She removed them, wrapped the Duke's feet in warmed flannel, and placed cushions beneath his knees. She did not ask him to stand. She asked him to look away while she touched different points upon his legs with wool, wood, and the cool bowl of a spoon. "Wool," he said when she brushed his left shin. "Where?" "Below the knee." It was 3 inches above. Again, by the 6th attempt, he was sweating. "Enough," Dr. Fell said. "His Grace will say when it is enough." Nathaniel gripped the chair arms. "Continue." Ruth tested heat and cold. The right foot felt less than the left, but it felt. When she asked him to lift his left knee, nothing visible happened. She laid her fingers over the wasted muscle. Beneath the cloth, it tightened. Nathaniel stared at her face. "Well, your body remembers the command. It did not move. A door may be swollen shut and still possess hinges." For the first time hope entered the room. It did not arrive as joy. It appeared as terror. Nathaniel turned his face toward the fire. "Leave us, Fell." The physician gathered his bottles. "Your Grace, I must object. You have done so repeatedly. You may now rest from the effort." When they were alone, the Duke spoke without looking at Ruth. "Do not make promises because you pity me. I do not pity you. Everyone pities an invalid. No, some fear you. Some serve you. At least one man is waiting to inherit from you. Pity is not the only reason people lower their voices near your chair." Nathaniel turned then, anger cutting color into his face. "You know nothing of my family. I know Lord Sebastian offered me 2 sovereigns to leave. He what? Then 3. Ruth removed the coins from her pocket and placed them on the desk. Nathaniel looked at them for a long moment. "Why did you stay?" The answer should have been honor. It should have been courage. "Because your kitchen served beef broth," she said. A rough sound left him. It took Ruth a moment to recognize it as laughter. Not the sharp laughter of the entrance hall, but something rusty from disuse. "You are the first honest person to enter this room in months. That says very little for the room." His laughter ended. The quiet that followed was different. Ruth began the first exercise. She looped a folded sheet beneath the Duke's foot and showed him how to pull with his hands while pushing against the cloth with his leg. The movement was scarcely an inch. They repeated it until his arms trembled and his jaw locked against pain. At the 6th attempt the chair shifted. Nathaniel had pressed his heel into the carpet. He looked down as though another man's foot lay before him. "Again," he whispered. By noon, exhaustion had grayed his skin. Ruth stopped despite his order to continue. She requested eggs, milk, broth, clean linen, 2 broom handles, and the use of the old orangery where winter sunlight warmed the tiles. Mr. Bell wrote every item in a neat hand. "And for yourself, Miss Alder?" he asked. "The same meals as the lower servants." The butler's expression softened by a degree. Mrs. Pike has already decided otherwise. At the household table nobody laughed. The maids watched Ruth eat as though expecting her to pocket the spoons. A young kitchen maid named Daisy finally pushed the butter nearer. "Is he truly going to walk?" Ruth spread the butter thinly over bread. "He is going to work. That was not what I asked." "It is the only answer I own." Across the room, Dr. Fell stood in the passage. He had heard. That afternoon, Ruth found the Duke's morning glass upon the silver tray. A dark crescent remained at the bottom. She touched one finger to it and tasted the smallest trace. The bitterness was stronger than 18 drops should have left. Someone had added more after Dr. Fell counted them. On the second day, Nathaniel woke before dawn with his skin crawling and every old pain sharpened. He rang once for his valet, twice for Dr. Fell, and a third time before pride made him strike the bell from the table. Ruth found it upon the carpet when she entered. The room smelled of sweat, extinguished candlewick, and the sour tincture on his breath. Nathaniel's hands trembled beneath the bedclothes. Dr. Fell stood at the bedside with a full dose prepared. "He requires relief," the physician said. "He requires a choice," Ruth answered. Nathaniel's eyes opened. "Give me the glass." Ruth did not refuse him. She poured away 4 drops, replaced them with water, and held the medicine while he drank. "You said 2, Fell accused. "Someone added more to yesterday's glass. We are correcting the count." Fell's gaze flicked toward the door. "Leave," Nathaniel said. "Your Grace, leave." When the latch closed, Ruth wrung a cloth in cool water and placed it behind the Duke's neck. "You should have told me it would feel like this. Would you have agreed? No, then you possess your answer." He caught her wrist. Even weakened, his hand was powerful. "Do not manage me." Ruth looked at his fingers around her skin. "Then do not ask me to help you." For several breaths neither moved. Nathaniel released her. She gave him barley water, opened the curtains to the pale dawn, and waited for the worst of the shaking to pass. Only then did she tell him about her father. Gideon Alder had served as an assistant surgeon through the Peninsular campaigns and at the hospital outside Brussels after Waterloo. Ruth's mother had died when she was 12. Thereafter, she had cleaned instruments, folded bandages, copied case notes, and learned to recognize the difference between a man who could not move and one whom pain had taught not to try. "You were a child," Nathaniel said. "So were many of the drummer boys. And your father allowed you near wounded soldiers. He allowed no such thing. Necessity did." After the war, Gideon opened a small apothecary shop in a market town. Respectable physicians despised him for treating people who paid in eggs, labor, or promises. When fever took him, creditors took the shop. A lamp overturned during the inventory, and fire consumed what debt had spared. "How long have you been without a home?" Nathaniel asked. 4 months. The blunt answer silenced him. Ruth pulled the coverlet aside. "Now bend your knee." "Your talent for comfort is remarkable. Bend it." She supported the heel while he strained. The first effort produced nothing. The second drew the leg half an inch toward him. On the third, a spasm seized the thigh and pain tore a curse from his throat. Ruth held the limb until the contraction eased. "That," she said, "is a muscle objecting to being remembered. It may forget me again. Then we shall become tiresome acquaintances." By breakfast, he could draw the heel 2 inches across the sheet. Lord Sebastian entered without knocking. His eyes found the bent knee, then the reduced bottle on the table. "Nathaniel, the estate solicitor arrives tomorrow. There are papers requiring your seal. Bring them to me. Dr. Fell believes business excites the nerves. Dr. Fell also believed my legs insensible." Sebastian's gaze moved to Ruth. 2 days of parlor tricks do not constitute a cure." "No," Nathaniel said. "But they constitute 2 days more than you expected." The cousins looked at each other, and something older than the accident passed between them. Sebastian laid a packet of documents on the escritoire. A loose page slid free and landed near Ruth's boot. She stooped to retrieve it. At the top were the words "Commission of Lunacy." Sebastian took the page from her hand. "A precaution," he said. "Nothing more." Nathaniel's face hardened. "Whose precaution?" "The family's. If your condition worsens, someone must possess legal authority to protect Greyhaven." "From whom?" Sebastian folded the paper. From anyone who might exploit a sick man's desperation, his eyes rested upon Ruth. He left the room carrying the page, but the threat remained. A peer's title could not be transferred by a physician's opinion. His property and affairs, however, could be placed under another man's control if Chancery declared him incapable of managing them. Nathaniel might remain Duke of Greyhaven while losing the power to govern a single acre. Ruth turned to him. "When is the examination?" "There is no examination. There will be." Nathaniel looked toward the closed door. "Then I had better be standing when they arrive." The old orangery had not held an orange tree in 12 years. Its glass roof leaked in 3 places. Dead vines twisted around iron columns, and cracked blue tiles showed where great pots had once stood. Yet the southern wall gathered what little sun November offered. By afternoon, the room became warm enough for Nathaniel to remove his coat. Ruth had 2 parallel rails constructed from broom handles, chair backs, and lengths of rope. Mr. Bell regarded the contraption with the solemn disapproval of a man whose household objects had been led into rebellion. "It will collapse," Nathaniel said. "Then you must try not to fall elegantly," Ruth replied. On the 3rd day, she taught him to sit forward without using the chair back. His body had learned to protect the injured place by keeping everything rigid. Each shift of weight sent pain around his waist like a tightened belt. Ruth placed one hand against the center of his chest. "Follow my palm." "You are pushing me. I am not." "Then your hand has a commanding manner." He leaned. The movement was no greater than the distance between one letter and the next upon a page. Sweat appeared at his temples. Ruth counted 5 breaths, then allowed him to rest. They worked until the sun had crossed 2 glass panes. At the far end of the orangery, Daisy arrived carrying a tray. Mrs. Pike had sent potted beef, bread, 2 boiled eggs, and hot milk strengthened with nutmeg. The Duke stared at the meal. "Fell permits broth." "Fell has been starving a grown man," Ruth said. "Muscle cannot rebuild itself from hot water and good intentions. Potted beef before noon may cause an uprising in the dining room. Then you must grow strong enough to suppress it." He ate. Ruth turned away while he did, pretending to examine the rope knots. Hunger still lived within her like a second creature. 3 days of food had quieted it, but the smell of beef could wake it with humiliating speed. "There are 2 eggs," Nathaniel said. "Both are yours. I dislike boiled eggs. You ate one yesterday." "Yesterday I was not being observed by a tyrant." She looked back. He held the 2nd egg toward her. "A bargain is a bargain, Miss Alder. Greyhaven promised to feed you." Ruth accepted it. They ate beside the abandoned orange beds while rain ticked against the glass. Nathaniel asked what she had planned to do after reaching Scotland. Ruth admitted there was no plan beyond finding an old army acquaintance of her father's. She asked what he had done before the accident. "Everything Sebastian now does," he said. "I rode the farms, heard petitions, reviewed leases, quarreled with drainage contractors. Once each season I endured London and allowed mothers to introduce daughters to me. A demanding life. I survived by refusing all of them. Perhaps that explains your punishment." "Do you believe Providence overturned my carriage because I declined to marry?" "No. But I suspect the disappointed mothers might." He smiled. In sunlight, the severity of his face eased. Ruth saw what he must have looked like before pain narrowed his world to beds, bottles, and the hands of other men lifting him. The moment lasted only until Lord Sebastian entered. He brought the estate solicitor, Mr. Crowell, a narrow man carrying a red leather portfolio. Dr. Fell followed with the indoor chair. "His Grace has worked long enough," Fell announced. Nathaniel's shoulders tightened. "His Grace will decide." "Then His Grace should know the Commissioner's medical examiner may arrive on the 10th morning," Sebastian said. "I had hoped to avoid discussing it before the servants." Daisy hurried out with the tray. Nathaniel's voice turned dangerously soft. You petitioned without my consent. I acted because rents have gone uncollected. Tenants appeal to a man who cannot see them, and reckless strangers now direct your medicine. The rents went uncollected under your management." For the first time, Sebastian lost color. Mr. Kroll cleared his throat. "Your Grace, the petition is preliminary. Lord Ray asserts only that prolonged opium use and bodily affliction may have impaired." Nathaniel swept the empty milk cup from the table. It shattered against the tiles. His right leg kicked. Every eye dropped to it. The movement was violent and uncontrolled, but it had lifted his heel clear of the floor. Ruth knelt beside him. "Do it again. I did not mean to. Anger found a road. Use it." Sebastian recovered. "A spasm proves nothing. That appears to be the family creed," Ruth said. Nathaniel gripped the makeshift rails. The cord stood out along his wrists. He stared at his right boot as if command alone might raise it. Nothing happened. Dr. Fell's confidence returned. Mr. Kroll closed his portfolio. Sebastian's smile settled back into place. Then Nathaniel's heel scraped 1 inch across the tile. Ruth heard his breath break. Again, it moved another inch. Sebastian left without waiting for the solicitor. That evening, Ruth inspected the Duke's braces in her room. The leather was fine, the buckles expensive, and the inner surfaces padded with lamb's wool. Nothing about them explained why the straps had been shortened twice. The newest holes had been punched so near the edge that the braces could scarcely close. She opened her father's instrument case. Most of the fitted spaces were empty. Creditors had sold the silver scalpels and bone saw. What remained was modest: forceps, probes, scissors, a roll of needles, and a brass percussion hammer Gideon had fashioned from a watchmaker's tool. Beneath the false bottom lay his campaign papers, tied with faded green ribbon. Ruth had carried them for 4 months without reading every page. Some were case notes. Some were letters from soldiers who had lived. One was a formal accusation written in her father's hand and never delivered. She unfolded it now. Gideon had accused a quartermaster named Colonel Alistair Ray of selling Army medical supplies during the winter of 1813. Blankets, bandages, lamp oil, and quinine had vanished from a field hospital while men froze and fever spread. Gideon had gathered names. Before he could testify, the records disappeared, and Colonel Ray accused him of theft instead. Colonel Ray had been Sebastian's father. The warning in Ruth's bedchamber returned to her. Every door in this county has closed against an Alder. She had thought Sebastian recognized the name from village gossip. Now she understood that the hatred was inherited. A board creaked in the passage. Ruth refolded the paper and slipped it beneath the false tray. The latch began to turn. She seized the brass hammer and stepped behind the door. Dr. Fell entered with a candle. Ruth pressed the tool beneath his jaw. Wax spilled across his fingers. "Searching a woman's room at night," she said. "Greyhaven's gentlemen possess unusual habits." Fell held very still. "Lord Ray said you might have stolen medicine. So you came without a witness. Lower that thing. Call for Mrs. Pike." He did not. Ruth saw his gaze slide toward the open case. "You knew my father," she said. "I knew of him. You knew what Colonel Ray did." The pulse jumped in Fell's throat against the brass. "Your father was a bitter man who failed to understand the necessities of war. Was withholding blankets from wounded soldiers a necessity? He had no proof. You came to find it." Fell knocked her arm aside and lunged for the case. Ruth caught the candle before it fell. He reached beneath the tray, but the doorway filled with Mr. Bell and 2 footmen. The butler looked from Ruth's case to the physician's hand. "Dr. Fell," he said, "His Grace requests your presence." Fell straightened his cuffs. "Miss Alder threatened me after you entered my room." Mr. Bell's face became carved stone. "This is a servant's corridor, sir. Sound travels." Fell left between the footmen. Ruth closed the instrument case, but the cold remained beneath her skin. Sebastian did not merely want her gone. He wanted the papers, and if he feared papers written 15 years earlier, then the past was not dead. The fourth day began with fog pressed against the windows. Nathaniel waited in the orangery beside the rails. He had insisted on being dressed before Ruth arrived. His braces were gone. A broad linen band supported his back, and thick stockings warmed his feet. Belle told me what happened. Ruth checked the rope knots. Then Belle talks too much. Fell says you attempted to cut his throat with a surgical instrument. It was a watchmaker's hammer. I stand corrected. He waited, but she offered nothing more. What did he seek? A reason to frighten me. Did he find one? Yes. Nathaniel's hands closed around the rails. You will tell me when you can stand. Anger flashed. You barter information now. I require your mind upon one task. Fear divides attention, and divided attention puts you on the floor. You forget to whom you speak. Ruth met his eyes. No one in this house ever forgets. The truth struck deeper than insult. Nathaniel looked away first. Ruth locked the wheels of his chair. A footman stood behind him, and Mr. Bell waited at one side. She placed Nathaniel's hands upon the rails. Lean forward. Bring your nose over your knees. A dignified instruction. Your dignity weighs too much. Leave it in the chair. He leaned. Ruth braced his right knee between hers and put one hand at his hip. Push through your heels. His arms took nearly all the effort. The chair creaked. His body lifted 2 inches and dropped back. Again. The second attempt lifted him farther. His knees buckled, and Ruth caught his weight against her shoulder. Pain tore through his back. He struck the rail with one fist. Again, he said before she could. On the third effort, Nathaniel Harcourt rose from his chair. He did not stand straight. His arms shook, his left knee bowed inward, and Ruth held half his weight at the waist. Yet both boots pressed the tile. For 3 breaths, the Duke was upright. The orangery doors opened. Lord Sebastian stood there with 2 fashionable neighbors. Lady Beatrice Mowbray and her son, Mr. Pell. They had plainly been invited to witness failure. Nathaniel saw them. His concentration broke. His knees folded. Ruth and Mr. Bell lowered him into the chair, but not before Mr. Pell laughed. It was a small sound, quickly disguised as a cough. Nathaniel heard it. The color in his face came not from exertion now, but humiliation. Sebastian approached with an expression of concern. This is precisely the spectacle I wish to spare you. Nathaniel looked at his boots. Get them out. Cousin, get them out. The glass roof threw his voice back upon them. Lady Beatrice retreated. Her son followed. Sebastian remained. The county is speaking of this woman, he said. They say she sleeps within the house and puts her hands beneath your clothing. If you retain any concern for the Harcourt name, you will end this. Nathaniel's face became unreadable. Ruth waited for him to defend her. He said nothing. That silence wounded more than laughter. She unfastened the support around his waist and handed it to Mr. Bell. We are finished for today. Nathaniel looked up. I did not dismiss you. No, Your Grace. You merely permitted your cousin to call me a whore. She walked out of the orangery before anyone saw the brightness in her eyes. Nathaniel found her an hour later in the stable yard, packing her few possessions into the instrument case. He had ordered 2 footmen to carry him there in the indoor chair. The fog silvered his black hair and beaded upon his coat. You cannot leave. Ruth tightened the case strap. I have slept in barns with kinder manners. Sebastian did not use that word. He used enough others. And I should have stopped him. She looked at him then. Proud men apologized as though paying tax. Late, reluctantly, and only when compelled. Nathaniel offered no excuse. The fog dampened his face. Pain had drawn hard lines beside his mouth. Why did you not? She asked. Because for one vile moment I was ashamed to need you. The honesty deprived her of anger's easiest answer, he continued. Not because of what you are, because of what I have become in front of you. Ruth's hand remained on the case. You stood today. I fell. Every man who learns to walk begins by falling. Most are fortunate enough to do it before they have pride. His mouth tightened. Stay. On what terms? Your own. Then Lord Sebastian does not enter the orangery. Dr. Fell does not touch your medicine. And if either man insults me beneath your roof, you answer before I must. Agreed. I have not finished. Something almost warm entered his eyes. Naturally. Mrs. Pike keeps the medicine chest. Mr. Bell records every dose in ink and witnesses you drink it. No glass remains unattended. And I want the name of the coachman who drove the night of your accident. Nathaniel's expression changed. Why? Because your braces were tightened to prevent recovery. Your medicine has been altered. Your cousin wants legal control of your estate. I no longer believe misfortune alone placed you in that chair. The fog seemed to close around them. The coachman's name was Amos Reed, Nathaniel said. He disappeared 2 weeks after the accident. Disappeared? Sebastian told me Reed stole 50 pounds and fled. Did you see proof? I saw a confession bearing his mark. Ruth's grip tightened on the case. A man who cannot write may have his mark witnessed by anyone. Nathaniel looked toward the stable doors. My carriage overturned where the east road bends above the quarry. The axle failed, and who inspected it? Sebastian. The Duke no longer had to ask why she wanted the coachman. Mr. Bell took charge of the medicine chest that afternoon. Dr. Fell protested until Nathaniel informed him his services would be reviewed after the 10 days. Lord Sebastian retreated to the estate office and sent 3 messengers before sunset. Ruth returned to the orangery alone. One of the broom handle rails had been cut nearly through. The 5th morning brought hard frost and a letter from Chancery. The commissioner's examiner would arrive on the 10th day, accompanied by 2 physicians and a clerk authorized to record whether Nathaniel could understand, remember, and govern his affairs. The petition described him as dependent upon opium, subject to violent outbursts, and vulnerable to manipulation. Every statement contained enough truth to carry a lie. Nathaniel read the letter twice. Sebastian has prepared this for months. Ruth stood across the library desk. Then we have 5 days. To make me walk before strangers, to make you master of yourself before them. The walking is for you. He searched her face. You still believe it can happen. I believe you stood. For 3 breaths. Today we attempt 4. They moved their work from the orangery to the portrait gallery after Ruth showed him the cut rail. The gallery stretched along the western wing, its carpet thin enough for firm footing. Generations of Harcourts watched Nathaniel drag himself upright between 2 sturdy tables. 4 breaths became 6. At 8, his right knee collapsed. At 10, he was sick into a basin. Ruth wiped his mouth, waited for his breathing to settle, then asked if he wished to stop. No, that was not bravery. It was a question, and that was my answer. She stood close enough for him to feel the warmth of her through his linen shirt. Without the braces and heavy coat, he was leaner than he had appeared. His strength gathered in shoulders and arms, while his legs bore the ruin of long neglect. "Do you trust me?" she asked. Nathaniel's hands tightened upon the table edges. "More than is sensible. Release your right hand." He stared at her. Ruth. It was the first time he had used her Christian name. Release it. His hand opened. For 1 breath, he balanced with only the left hand upon the table, and Ruth's palm against his chest. Then he pitched forward. She caught him. His arms closed around her from instinct, and the force drove them both against the table. Ruth's cheek pressed to his shoulder. Beneath sweat and linen she smelled cedar soap and the faint bitter trace of laudanum leaving his body. Neither spoke. His heart struck hard against her palm. Ruth lifted her face. Nathaniel looked down, all pride stripped from his expression. His breath touched her mouth. A knock sounded at the gallery door. They moved apart too late. Mrs. Pike entered with a sealed letter for Ruth. The housekeeper's gaze took in Nathaniel standing against the table, Ruth's hands at his waist, and the distance that had failed to return between them. "A boy brought this from the village," she said. The letter contained only one sentence: "Amos Reed is alive, and he will be dead before Sunday if you continue." Nathaniel read it over Ruth's shoulder. "You are not leaving the house. The message was sent to make me search, which is why you will remain here. If Reed lives, he may be the only person who can prove what happened. And the writer expects you to think so." Ruth folded the paper. "My father taught me that a threat reveals two things: what a man fears, and where he fears you will look. Your father also died discredited and nearly penniless." The words escaped Nathaniel in anger. Ruth went very still. He saw the injury at once. "I did not mean, no. You meant to protect me by reminding me what resistance costs." She placed the letter in her pocket. "It cost my father everything, because powerful men knew no one would listen. I am listening now." That night, someone searched the stable loft. The intruder found no Ruth Alder. She had gone to the village dressed in Daisy's cloak, with Mr. Bell's reluctant assistance and the Duke's command ringing uselessly behind her. At the Greyhound Inn, an ostler remembered Amos Reed. The former coachman had returned once, thin and frightened, to collect wages Greyhaven supposedly owed him. Lord Sebastian's agent had sent him away. The ostler believed Reed was living with a widowed sister near St. Jude's Ruined Priory, 9 miles north. Ruth paid for the information with one of Sebastian's sovereigns. She left the second on Nathaniel's desk with a note: "For the meal I have not earned tonight." Nathaniel crushed the paper in his fist. He ordered horses, but Dr. Fell arrived before the carriage could be prepared. The physician carried news that froze the household more effectively than the night air. A woman had been found unconscious on the North Road. She wore a brown cloak and carried a leather instrument case. Nathaniel reached the North Road before midnight. He refused Dr. Fell's drops and traveled in the closed carriage with Mr. Bell, 2 grooms, and the indoor chair tied behind. Each rut drove pain through his back. Each mile gave him time to consider that the woman who had entered his home for bread might now lie dead because he had allowed his cousin to govern it. They found Ruth in the gatehouse of St. Jude's Priory. Blood had dried above her right ear, her borrowed cloak was torn, and the instrument case lay open upon the floor, its papers scattered. Beside her sat an older man with a ruined left hand and the stooped shoulders of a lifelong coachman. Amos Reed was alive. "The woman Dr. Fell described?" Nathaniel asked. Ruth pressed a cloth to her temple. "Mrs. Reed. I lent her my cloak and asked her to guard the case while I searched the priory. The men struck her first and me when I returned. She will live. Her brother pulled us both from the road." Nathaniel looked at Amos. "Why did you run?" The coachman's damaged fingers worried the brim of his cap. "Lord Ray made me put my mark to a confession, your grace. Said he'd send my sister to prison for receiving stolen goods if I spoke. But I never stole £50. From beneath his coat, Amos produced an iron bolt as long as a man's hand. A clean groove had been filed almost through its center. Found this in the grass after the carriage went over. Pivot bolt from the front axle. It had not snapped from the fall. Someone cut it before. "Can you prove whose hand did it?" Nathaniel asked. Amos swallowed. "I saw Dr. Fell in the carriage house that afternoon. Lord Ray was with him. When I asked what they were about, they said his grace had ordered a repair. After the wreck, Dr. Fell told me you'd die before morning. Lord Ray paid me to disappear." He unfolded a creased receipt bearing Sebastian's signature and the amount of £50. Nathaniel had spent 18 months believing his body had betrayed him. The truth was colder. Blood had arranged the accident, medicine had prolonged it, and friendship had watched from behind his chair while he surrendered one piece of authority after another. Ruth gathered her father's papers. Several had been trampled into mud. Fell recognized my father because he served under Colonel Ray, she said. He knew the old accusation could establish what sort of men they were. That is why they searched my room. Nathaniel looked at the blood upon her face. And still you came here, so did you. He reached for her hand. Come home, Ruth. Greyhaven changed over the next 4 days. Amos and his sister were hidden in the Dower cottage under Mr. Bell's protection. The axle bolt, receipt, and Gideon Alder's surviving deposition were locked in the estate chapel, whose only key hung from Mrs. Pike's waist. A magistrate in the neighboring county received a sealed account by special messenger. Nathaniel dismissed Dr. Fell, though the man refused to leave the district. Sebastian remained at Greyhaven under the pretense that he knew nothing of the attack. Nathaniel wanted him close until the commissioners arrived. Ruth worked through the pain in her temple. On the 6th day, Nathaniel stood for 20 breaths. On the 7th, he shifted his weight from one foot to the other. On the 8th, he lifted his left boot and placed it half a length forward. The effort left him shaking in her arms. "One step," he said against her hair. "With 3 people holding you. You have a gift for diminishing triumph. It keeps triumph hungry." On the 9th evening, Nathaniel stood between the portrait gallery tables, while Ruth moved beyond the reach of his hands. "Come to me," she said. He looked at the empty carpet between them. "That is not an instruction. It is the only one that matters." He released the table. His right foot moved. The knee nearly buckled, but held. His left followed with a dragging half-step. Ruth did not move closer. Nathaniel crossed the space by inches, fighting for each one until his hand closed around hers. 2 steps, he said. "Tomorrow you will need more. Tomorrow there will be physicians, lawyers, and Sebastian. Then do not walk for them." His thumb moved over her knuckles. "For whom?" Ruth's voice softened. "For the man you intend to be when they are gone." Before dawn on the 10th day, Dr. Fell returned through the old laundry passage. He struck Mr. Bell, stole the chapel key from Mrs. Pike's room, and carried the evidence to the abandoned orangery. Ruth followed the smell of smoke. She found Fell feeding Gideon's papers into a brazier, while Sebastian held Amos's receipt over the flame. Ruth seized the iron axle bolt from the table. Sebastian caught her before she reached the door. "All this for 10 dinners," he said, twisting her arm behind her. "No," Ruth answered through the pain, "for every man you believed would remain silent." She drove her heel down upon his foot and threw the bolt through a glass pane. The crash brought the gardeners. Fell fled through the opposite door, but Mr. Bell and 2 grooms met him in the passage. Sebastian released Ruth and reached for the burning receipt. Half of it blackened before she stamped out the flame. It was enough. The commissioners assembled at 10 o'clock in the portrait gallery. 2 physicians sat beside a chancery clerk. The county magistrate stood near the door with Amos Reed. Servants lined the passage beyond. Lady Beatrice and Mr. Pell had returned, summoned by Sebastian before his plan failed. Dr. Fell was held in the morning room, and Lord Sebastian stood pale and furious beneath the portrait of the first Duke of Greyhaven. Nathaniel entered in his bath chair. A murmur ran through the gallery. Sebastian smiled. "As I warned you, gentlemen, my cousin's supposed recovery exists only in the claims of that woman." Ruth stood at the far end of the carpet. Her bruised arm rested in a sling, but she held Sebastian's half-burned receipt in her other hand. The senior physician questioned Nathaniel about the year, the king, his estates, his income, and the terms of 3 leases selected at random. Nathaniel answered each one. The clerk then read passages from letters Nathaniel had supposedly written during his illness. Nathaniel listened, then looked at Sebastian. "Those are not mine." "The signatures are yours," Sebastian said. "The hand is mine. The words were placed before me after Fell gave me 70 drops." The independent physicians exchanged a glance. Sebastian turned to them. Delusion and suspicion are common in disorders of the brain. His temper has become violent. He imagines conspiracy where his family offered care. Amos stepped forward and told them about the axle bolt. Ruth placed the burned receipt beside it. Mr. Bell produced the medicine record. The bottles Fell had left behind contained a concentration far stronger than their labels declared. Still Sebastian fought, a servant, a beggar, and a dismissed coachman. These are the witnesses upon whom you would trust a dukedom. No, Nathaniel said. Trust me. He pushed the carriage rug away. Ruth's breath stopped. They had agreed he would answer questions, show movement in both legs, and attempt no display if fatigue overcame him. Nathaniel had slept 2 hours. His face was white with pain. He locked the chair wheels and placed both hands on the arms. Sebastian laughed. It was the same sound that had filled the entrance hall 10 days earlier. Nathaniel rose. His legs trembled. He paused until the shaking eased, then straightened without Ruth's hands upon him. The gallery fell so quiet that the brazier in the next room could be heard settling into ash. He looked at Ruth. You asked to be fed for 10 days. Yes, Your Grace. The 10th is not over. He took one step, then another. The 3rd dragged. The 4th almost failed. On the 5th, one physician began to rise, but Ruth lifted her hand. Nathaniel's gaze remained fixed upon her. 6, 7, Mr. Pell, who had laughed in the orangery, lowered his eyes. Not 9. Sebastian backed against the wall. The 10th step carried Nathaniel into Ruth's reach. He did not collapse. He stood before the woman who had arrived wet, hungry, and unwanted, and he placed his hand in hers. No one is laughing now, he said. The magistrate ordered Sebastian and Dr. Fell detained for examination on charges of conspiracy, assault, forgery, and attempted fraud upon Chancery. Fell confessed before sunset. He admitted increasing Nathaniel's laudanum, tightening the braces, falsifying medical reports, and helping Sebastian conceal the damaged axle. Sebastian's petition collapsed with his reputation. His creditors descended within a fortnight. He never again entered Greyhaven, and the inheritance he had tried to hurry passed beyond his reach when Nathaniel eventually had an heir. Gideon Alder's name was cleared by testimony preserved in Army correspondence and by Fell's confession concerning Colonel Ray. Ruth received the news without triumph. She carried the corrected record to her father's grave and remained there until the winter light faded. Nathaniel did not walk unaided the next morning. Recovery required months of work, several falls, and the counsel of a reputable surgeon from Edinburgh. By spring he could cross the terrace with a cane. By summer he rode the gentlest horse in the Greyhaven stable. Ruth refused the house Nathaniel first offered her. I will not become another object Your Grace acquired because it was damaged, she said. So he offered something different. Greyhaven's unused hunting lodge became a convalescent home for wounded soldiers, impoverished laborers, and women turned away from formal medical training. Ruth directed it and received a salary set down in her own contract. Nathaniel asked her advice in public, disagreed with her honestly, and learned that gratitude was not the same as love. 6 months after the inquiry, he found her in the restored orangery. New citrus trees stood in clay pots where the makeshift rails had been. Ruth was training a young quarryman to balance upon an injured foot. When the lesson ended, Nathaniel crossed the tiles without his cane. He stopped where he had first stood for 3 breaths. I have another bargain, he said. Ruth glanced at the ring in his hand. How many days? All of them. He did not ask her to save him. He asked her to govern Greyhaven beside him, to quarrel with him when pride made him foolish, and to build a home in which neither hunger nor rank could make truth inaudible. Ruth made him wait long enough to understand that a duke's proposal was not a command. Then she said yes. The tun mocked the match until Nathaniel and Ruth appeared together at their first winter assembly. He crossed the ballroom without a cane, but it was Ruth whom the crowd watched. The woman once turned from a charity door, now wore the Greyhaven diamonds, and carried herself with the calm of someone who knew jewels added nothing to her worth. Years later, the first snow of every winter found them walking the eastern terrace together. Nathaniel's step remained slightly uneven, and Ruth never allowed him to call it weakness. Behind them, two lines of footprints crossed the white stone, one steady, one imperfect, and neither turning back. Thank you for watching Ruth and Nathaniel's complete story, a reminder that dignity can survive hunger, ridicule, and even the schemes of powerful men. If their journey from a cruel wager to hard-won love moved you, please like this video. It helps the algorithm share our historical romance stories with more drama lovers. Send it to a friend who enjoys courageous heroines, humbled dukes, and deeply satisfying redemption. Subscribe to Secrets of Belgrave and turn on notifications so you do not miss our next full story. And tell us in the comments, when everyone laughed at Ruth's promise, would you have trusted her with the 10 days?